The chatter of the upscale bar faded to background noise as I watched David enter, his arm wrapped possessively around a woman barely old enough to legally drink. 3 months since our divorce, and the sight of him still made my stomach clench with a mixture of anger and humiliation. I hadn't planned on seeing my ex-husband tonight, hadn't dressed for a confrontation in my one decent black dress, the only piece of clothing that survived the financial massacre he'd left behind. But here he was, flaunting his new life while I nursed a drink I could barely afford. The bartender slid another martini toward me, nodding toward the other end of the bar. "Courtesy of the gentleman in the corner," he said, his voice barely audible over the jazz quartet playing softly in the background. My eyes followed his gesture to a man sitting alone, his tailored suit and quiet confidence immediately setting him apart from the weekend crowd. Dark eyes met mine with an intensity that made my breath catch, a silent acknowledgement passing between us as he raised his glass slightly. David's laughter cut through my moment of distraction, drawing my attention back to where he stood with his date, now scanning the room as if looking for an audience. I knew that laugh, the performative one he used when he wanted to be noticed, the one that preceded him making a point at someone else's expense. His gaze found mine across the crowded room, triumph flashing in his eyes when he recognized me. I could already imagine the story he'd tell his friends later, about his pathetic ex-wife drinking alone on a Friday night, still wearing the earrings he'd given me before everything fell apart. Something inside me snapped. Before I could reconsider, I was sliding off my bar stool, martini in hand, walking with deliberate confidence toward the mysterious man who'd bought my drink. I didn't have a plan beyond escaping David's pitying gaze, just the desperate need to not be the victim in tonight's narrative. The stranger watched my approach with curious interest, his expression revealing nothing as I leaned down and whispered, "I need a huge favor. My ex just walked in, and I'd rather not be the sad divorcee drinking alone tonight." His lips curved into a slight smile that transformed his serious face, creating a dimple in his right cheek that seemed at odds with his otherwise intimidating presence. "What exactly did you have in mind?" he asked, his voice deep with a subtle accent I couldn't place. "Just pretend you know me," I said, setting my drink down and gathering my courage. "Maybe laugh at something I say. That's all I'm asking for. 5 minutes of your time to preserve what's left of my dignity. What happened next wasn't part of my impromptu plan." As David's gaze burned into my back, the stranger stood up in one fluid motion, his hand gently cupping my face as he leaned in. "Perhaps this would be more convincing," he murmured, giving me a moment to pull away before his lips met mine. The kiss was gentle but purposeful, his hand warm against my cheek, steadying me as the room seemed to tilt around us. I hadn't kissed anyone since David, hadn't felt the disorienting rush of connection with a complete stranger whose name I didn't even know. When we finally separated, the stranger's eyes held a glint of amusement and something darker, more dangerous. "Vincent," he said simply, his thumb brushing across my lower lip in a gesture that felt strangely possessive for someone I'd just met. "Lily," I responded, my voice embarrassingly breathless as I tried to regain my composure. I risked a glance toward David, finding him staring with undisguised shock, his date forgotten as he watched the scene unfold with narrowed eyes. Vincent followed my gaze, his posture shifting subtly as he assessed David across the room. Something in his stance changed, a predatory stillness settling over him that made the hairs on my arms stand on end despite the warmth of the crowded bar. "Your ex-husband seems displeased," Vincent observed, his hand moving to the small of my back with natural ease, as though we'd known each other for years instead of minutes. The casual possessiveness of the gesture wasn't lost on David, whose face had flushed an angry red. I should have felt triumphant seeing David's reaction, but something in his expression sent a chill through me, the familiar tightening of his jaw that had always preceded his worst moments during our marriage. "I should go," I murmured, suddenly aware that my impulsive act might have consequences beyond tonight. Vincent's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly against my back. "Allow me to walk you out," he said, the suggestion carrying a weight that didn't invite refusal. He signaled to the bartender, who nodded in immediate understanding, as though Vincent were a regular whose requests were prioritized. Outside, the September air felt cool against my flushed skin, as Vincent guided me toward a sleek black car waiting at the curb. A man in a dark suit opened the door without being prompted, his expression impassive as he nodded respectfully to Vincent. "I appreciate the rescue, but I can get myself home," I said, stepping back slightly, suddenly aware of how little I knew about the man whose lips had been on mine moments ago. The kiss was more than enough to make my point. Vincent's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained watchful as they scanned the street behind me. "Your ex-husband is currently arguing with the bouncer to follow us out," he said calmly. "I'm offering you a ride to ensure he doesn't continue this interaction elsewhere." My stomach dropped at his words, memories of David's temper flashing through my mind, the thrown glasses, the wall punched inches from my head, the promises that next time he wouldn't miss. I hadn't told anyone about those moments, had hidden the evidence and made excuses until finally filing for divorce after finding him with his assistant. Vincent must have read the fear in my expression because his voice gentled further. "You're safe with me, Lily. I have no expectations beyond ensuring you get home without incident," he said, holding out his hand like an offered lifeline. I hesitated only a moment before taking it, sliding into the car's leather interior that smelled of expensive cologne and subtle power. Vincent joined me, giving the driver an address I didn't recognize after asking for my phone and typing something quickly before returning it. "We're not going to my apartment, are we?" I asked, as the car turned away from the direction of my modest rental in Queens. My fingers tightened around my purse, suddenly aware of how vulnerable my position was, in a stranger's car, heading to an unknown destination. Vincent's expression remained unreadable as streetlights flashed across his face. "I have a penthouse in Manhattan where you'll be safe tonight," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Your ex-husband has your address, I assume?" The casual way he assessed the situation sent a chill through me, the immediate understanding of danger that most people would dismiss. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, as I thought of the times I'd found David's car, parked outside my building weeks after our divorce. The car glided to a stop in front of a towering high-rise, its glass exterior reflecting the city lights like a midnight mirror. A doorman immediately stepped forward, opening the car door with a respectful, "Good evening, Mr. Moretti," that seemed to carry weight beyond simple courtesy. Inside the lobby, security nodded to Vincent without requiring identification, their eyes scanning me with professional assessment before returning to vigilant observation of the entrance. The exclusive access, the immediate deference, it all painted a picture of a man whose influence extended far beyond what I'd imagined at the bar. The elevator required a key card and fingerprint, rising silently to the top floor, where it opened directly into a stunning penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Modern furnishings in shades of gray and black contrasted with art pieces that I recognized as museum-worthy originals. "Make yourself comfortable," Vincent said, removing his suit jacket and draping it carefully over a chair. "The guest room is through that door if you'd like to rest. There are new toiletries and clothes that should fit you in the bathroom." I stood frozen in the center of the living room, trying to process the surreal turn my evening had taken. "Who keeps women's clothing in their guest bathroom?" I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice as I considered the implications. Vincent's lips curved slightly as he poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "My sister stays here occasionally," he explained, offering me a glass, "though I suspect you have other questions beyond my housekeeping arrangements." The whiskey burned pleasantly as I took a small sip, gathering courage to voice the thoughts swirling through my mind. The car, the security, this place. "Who are you, Vincent? Really?" He studied me for a long moment, as though deciding how much truth I could handle. "I manage various business interests throughout the city," he finally said, his deliberate vagueness more telling than any specific answer could be. An alert chimed from his phone, drawing his attention momentarily. His expression hardened as he read something on the screen, fingers typing a quick response before returning his focus to me with practiced ease. 3 days turned into a week at Vincent's penthouse, each night beginning with my insistence that I should return to my apartment, each morning dawning with me still wrapped in luxury I'd never known. My modest job as a graphic designer allowed remote work, and Vincent had arranged for my essential belongings to be collected by his staff. "David has been watching your apartment," Vincent explained over breakfast one morning, sliding a tablet across the table showing security footage of my ex lurking in the parking lot. The casual way he monitored David's movements should have frightened me, but instead offered a strange comfort I wasn't ready to examine. My 5-year-old daughter Emma adjusted to our temporary arrangement with surprising ease, delighted by the penthouse's hidden features: a bookshelf that revealed a secret playroom, a bathtub with jets that created rainbow bubbles, a chef who made pancakes shaped like cartoon characters at her request. Vincent's behavior around Emma revealed a gentleness I hadn't expected, his usual intensity softening when she shyly asked him to read her bedtime stories or help build elaborate pillow forts in the living room. He never overstepped, never presumed a role in her life, yet something natural developed between them that made my heart ache. Each night after Emma slept, Vincent and I would talk for hours on the balcony overlooking the glittering city. He shared carefully edited stories of his childhood in Sicily, of a father whose expectations weighed like concrete, of responsibilities inherited rather than chosen, always omitting specific details that might reveal the true nature of his business. I reciprocated with stories of my own, my dreams of becoming an artist derailed by practical concerns, my whirlwind romance with David that slowly transformed into a controlling nightmare, my determination to give Emma a life unmarred by the fear that had shadowed my marriage. "You're stronger than you realize," Vincent said one evening, his fingers gently tracing the faded scar along my wrist, evidence of the night David had grabbed me so hard he'd drawn blood. The tenderness of his touch contrasted sharply with the cold fury in his eyes as he examined the mark. Our first real kiss came 2 weeks after the bar incident. Not a performance for an audience, but something genuine that happened in his kitchen at midnight. I'd come looking for tea, finding him instead staring out the window with a glass of whiskey and shadows in his eyes. The attraction between us had been building since that first night, present in lingering glances, in hands that found excuses to touch, in conversations that stretched until dawn. But it was his vulnerability that finally broke my resistance, the rare glimpse of uncertainty in a man who controlled everything around him. "I should tell you to leave," he whispered against my lips, his hands cradling my face as though I might shatter. "There are parts of my life you don't want to know about, Lily. Things that would make you take Emma and run." I knew he was right, had seen enough to piece together the reality of who Vincent Moretti truly was. The late-night meetings, the coded phone conversations, the men who appeared with bruised knuckles and respectful deference seeking his guidance. Yet still, I pressed closer, seeking his warmth despite the danger it represented. Something shifted between us after that night, an unspoken acknowledgement that we were crossing boundaries that couldn't easily be redrawn. Vincent began introducing me to carefully selected aspects of his world. Art auctions where millions exchanged hands with casual nods, restaurants where chefs prepared meals never listed on menus, private clubs where conversations hushed when he entered. A month into our strange arrangement, reality intruded in the form of legal papers delivered to Vincent's penthouse. David's petition for full custody of Emma, citing my immoral lifestyle and dangerous associations as evidence of my unfitness as a mother. The documents included photos of me entering Vincent's building, emerging from his car, holding his hand at a restaurant. "He's been having us followed," I whispered, hands shaking as I spread the papers across Vincent's desk. The thought of David's eyes tracking my movements, documenting moments I'd thought private, made me physically ill. Vincent's response was controlled fury, a careful stillness that somehow felt more dangerous than any outburst. He made a single phone call, speaking in rapid Italian before switching to English only to say, "No harm comes to him, just information." Within hours, a folder appeared containing details about David's life that shocked even me. Gambling debts to people who didn't use legal means of collection, an apartment maintained for meetings with women barely out of high school, offshore accounts hiding money that should have been declared in our divorce settlement. "Use this," Vincent said, sliding the folder toward me. "Your lawyer can negotiate from a position of strength now." He didn't mention how such information had been obtained, and I didn't ask. Another unspoken agreement in our relationship built on selective truths. The custody threat forced conversations we'd been avoiding, about what exactly we were to each other, about the future, about the realities of Vincent's world, and whether there could ever be a place in it for Emma and me. Late-night whispers became tense discussions that left us both restless and uncertain. "I want you both in my life," Vincent admitted one night, his usual confidence giving way to rare vulnerability. "But my life comes with risks you can't imagine. Enemies who wouldn't hesitate to use you and Emma to get to me." I'd suspected the truth for weeks, had seen the signs in the security that surrounded us, in the deference shown to Vincent throughout the city, in the way certain names were never spoken directly in his presence. Still, hearing him acknowledge the danger made it suddenly, frighteningly real. "Tell me everything," I said, needing to finally face the full truth of the man I'd somehow fallen in love with. No more half-truths or careful omissions. "I need to know exactly who you are, Vincent." His confession came quietly, matter-of-factly, as we sat on his balcony overlooking a city he'd described in pieces, but never fully explained his role within. The Moretti family's control of distribution channels throughout the Northeast, the legitimate businesses that cleaned money from less savory operations, his position as heir apparent following his father's illness. Each revelation should have sent me running, should have confirmed every fear I'd pushed aside. Instead, I found myself focusing on the man beneath the title, the way he gently tucked Emma in at night, his respect for my independence, his determination to shield us both from the darkness of his world. The next morning brought a moment of choice. I could take Emma and leave, returning to a life of constant fear from David, but safely distant from Vincent's dangerous world. Or I could stay and accept the complicated reality of loving a man whose power was built on foundations I'd always considered immoral. "I want to see it," I said over breakfast, Emma happily distracted by cartoons in the other room. Vincent's questioning look prompted me to continue. "Your business, your real offices, the parts you've been hiding. If I'm making this choice, I need to see everything." His hesitation was visible, a rare crack in his usually seamless composure. "Some doors can't be unclosed, Lily," he said finally, studying my face as though memorizing it, perhaps fearing it would be the last time I looked at him without fear or judgment. The black car took us to an unassuming building in Little Italy, the restaurant on the ground floor bustling with lunchtime customers, who greeted Vincent with a familiarity that spoke of generations of loyalty. An elderly woman named Maria embraced him like a son before turning curious eyes on me, assessing me with the shrewd judgment of someone who had seen many women come and go. Behind the kitchen, a heavy door led to a staircase descending into what appeared to be a wine cellar, but opened into a sophisticated office space. Men in expensive suits paused in their conversations as we entered, their respectful nods acknowledging Vincent's authority without question. Enzo, Vincent's consigliere according to the brief introduction, raised an eyebrow at my presence, but made no comment as he handed over a leather portfolio containing what I recognized as balance sheets and property acquisitions. The casual way they discussed millions in transactions made my graphic designer salary seem laughably insignificant. I observed silently as Vincent moved through his world with natural command, resolving disputes between business owners seeking protection, reviewing reports of territory incursions by rival families, authorizing payments to politicians whose campaigns benefited from Moretti support. The power he wielded was absolute and terrifying in its scope. What struck me most wasn't the obvious illegality of certain operations, but the complex moral code that governed everything: respect for tradition, protection of family above all else, a strange honor system that drew clear lines even in criminal enterprise. Vincent's world operated by rules as rigid as any legal system, just with different boundaries and far more severe consequences. By late afternoon, I'd seen enough to understand the empire Vincent controlled and the weight he carried. "You're right to be scared," he said quietly as we returned to the car, his hand finding mine with tentative uncertainty. "I wouldn't blame you for walking away." Something had shifted during those hours, my naive perception giving way to clearer understanding of both the danger and the man. Vincent wasn't just a criminal. He was a leader protecting his people, maintaining order in a system that predated him and would continue long after, trying to steer it toward legitimacy while honoring commitments to those who depended on him. "I need time," I whispered, overwhelmed by everything I'd witnessed, "to think about what this means for Emma, for us. I can't just—" My voice trailed off as Vincent's phone rang, his expression immediately hardening as he answered with a curt "when" that silenced the car. The attack came without warning. 3 of David's hired men following information he'd sold to the Colombo family about Vincent's security routines. The ambush in the parking garage might have succeeded if not for Enzo's suspicions about unusual payments traced to David's offshore accounts. Vincent returned to the penthouse with a bullet graze across his shoulder and a coldness in his eyes I'd never seen before. "Pack essentials for you and Emma," he instructed, his voice leaving no room for questions. "We leave in an hour." The reality of Vincent's world crashed into mine with terrifying clarity as security teams swept the penthouse, checking for surveillance devices and weaknesses in our protection. Emma watched wide-eyed from her bedroom doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit as men with concealed weapons moved efficiently through our temporary home. The safe house in Sicily had been in Vincent's family for generations, a sprawling villa surrounded by olive groves and protected by both modern security and the loyalty of locals whose families had served the Moretti name for decades. In any other circumstances, it would have felt like paradise. Vincent's father, Antonio, occupied the east wing of the villa, his once powerful frame now diminished by illness, but his eyes still sharp as they assessed me and Emma upon our arrival. He spoke rapid Italian to his son, questions I couldn't understand but whose meaning I could guess from the defensive tension in Vincent's responses. "He wants to know if you understand what loving me means," Vincent translated later, as we stood on the terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. if you're prepared for a life where danger will always exist at the edges, where Emma will someday have to learn truths that might make her hate us both. The old man's question hung between us, as days turned to weeks in Sicily. Emma quickly adapting to her new surroundings with the resilience of childhood, learning Italian phrases from the housekeeper, collecting seashells along the private beach, falling asleep to Vincent's stories about the island's ancient myths. I found unexpected peace in the villa's sunlit gardens, sketching for the first time in years as Vincent managed his business remotely, restructuring operations in New York, while David's betrayal was dealt with in ways he carefully didn't detail to me. The distance provided clarity I'd lacked in the whirlwind of New York. Antonio's health declined rapidly during our third week, bringing Vincent's siblings and their families to the villa for what everyone recognized might be final goodbyes. I watched as cousins welcomed Emma into their play without question, as Vincent's sisters evaluated me with guarded curiosity, as the complex network of Moretti family dynamics revealed itself in every interaction. "You don't have to stay," Vincent said one night, finding me alone on the beach after Antonio had a particularly difficult day. "I've arranged papers, accounts, a new identity in Vancouver. You and Emma could disappear, start fresh somewhere David would never find you." The offer caught me off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because I realized immediately I didn't want it. Somewhere in the chaos of the past months, in the fear and uncertainty and revelations, I had made my decision without consciously acknowledging it. I turned to face Vincent, seeing not the dangerous mafia boss or the powerful businessman, but simply the man who read Emma bedtime stories and laughed at my terrible attempts at cooking Italian food. "This is where we belong," I said, the certainty in my voice surprising us both. Antonio Moretti passed away peacefully the following morning, his hand clasped in Vincent's, as the first light of dawn filtered through the bedroom windows. The funeral brought family members from across Europe and America, the small village church filled with black-clad figures whose solemn respect transcended language barriers. I stood beside Vincent throughout the service, Emma's small hand in mine, as she solemnly mimicked the behaviors of the Italian children around her. The village priest spoke of legacy and family, of sins and redemption, his words washing over me as I watched Vincent accept his father's role with quiet dignity. The reading of Antonio's will took place in the villa's study, family members seated according to tradition, while Enzo, who had flown in for the funeral, distributed sealed envelopes to each of Vincent's siblings. My surprise at being included among the recipients must have shown on my face, prompting a rare smile from the consigliere. Inside my envelope lay not money or property, but a delicate silver key attached to a chain, Antonio's final message delivered through Vincent's mother's locket, which had remained locked since her death 20 years earlier. Vincent's sharp intake of breath told me the significance went beyond simple jewelry. "He approved," Vincent whispered later that night, the locket open on the bedside table revealing a small compartment containing a handwritten note. He rarely gave his blessing to anyone outside the family, but he wrote this the night after we arrived. "The transition of power happened with ceremonial precision in the days following the funeral, Vincent accepting the responsibilities of his birthright in rituals that blended Catholic tradition with older, more secretive practices. I witnessed the weight settling onto his shoulders, the last vestiges of hesitation giving way to resolved determination. Our return to New York came with changes already in motion, Vincent's legitimate businesses expanding while certain other operations were quietly dismantled, security protocols redesigned to create layers of separation between his public life and private interests, a path toward legitimacy laid out over years rather than overnight. David had disappeared during our absence, his debts to dangerous creditors reportedly settled by an anonymous benefactor on the condition he relocate permanently to the West Coast. I never asked Vincent for details, maintaining the careful balance of knowing enough without knowing everything. The custody papers were withdrawn, replaced by a generous agreement that relinquished all of David's parental rights in exchange for financial settlement that would ensure Emma's education through college. His signature on the documents showed a trembling uncertainty I'd never seen in his handwriting before. We moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn, rather than returning to the Manhattan penthouse, a home with a garden where Emma could play, with a studio where I could pursue the art I'd abandoned years ago, with security features subtly integrated into seemingly normal architecture, a compromise between Vincent's world and mine. Marriage came a year later in a small ceremony on the Sicilian villa's terrace, Emma proudly scattering flower petals before us, while Vincent's siblings and their families mingled with the few close friends I'd maintained through the chaos of the past years. No grand public display, just a private commitment between two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. I never imagined this life, I admitted to Vincent as we danced under strings of lights with the Mediterranean glittering behind us. When I kissed you that night at the bar, I was just trying to make David jealous. I had no idea I was kissing my future, my fate. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support is what allows me to continue creating these stories for you.